Everyone, welcome to Manufacturing Hub. If you folks are listening to us live, happy Wednesday for most of you. Thursday morning if you are somehow listening in Australia. Happy tomorrow in that case. Today and this theme, we're talking all about building a systems integrator. We've got Rich on, who's got a wealth of experience, and I'm super excited to go get into it. We're going to talk about what he's done in various different verticals over the course of his last 20 or so years of his career. The last couple weeks, we had an awesome conversation with Dustin last week, talking about oil and gas and mining and talking about building and growing a systems integrator in Canada. And then we had Dylan on 2 weeks ago talking about what he is doing with Avalara and the first year or so of that build, which is very exciting. If you guys have not listened to those episodes, please feel free to go check them out in links that we'll go ahead and provide after this. After this. Couple of notes. If you guys are new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you're new here, we are a live show and we love to have fun and ask questions. Every week, Vlad and I get to go and sit down with a different practitioner to go talk about their experiences. If you have questions like Vlad and I do, please feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat, either for Rich or for Vlad or myself. Most of you guys are probably listening on LinkedIn, and if you are, again, please feel free to go ahead and connect with Rich and everyone else in here as you're doing it. If you're listening in some other format, that is awesome. And a special thanks to all of our podcast listeners at home. Please feel free to go ahead and jump in with us 4 o'clock East Coast time during any of our live shows. Having said that, and without further ado, everyone officially welcome to Manufacturing Hub. This is episode 272. My name is Dave. This guy up here is Vlad. This month, we're talking all about building a systems integrator, and we'd like to welcome Rich on board. Rich, thank you so much for being here this week.
Well, and I appreciate you guys having me on. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely, Rich. Thank you so much for taking the time. Before we dive into the actual questions about building out a systems integrator, could you please give us an overview of your background? Walk us through, how did you get started in the industrial automation space? What kind of, again, hats you wore throughout your career? And ultimately, tell us a little bit more as to what you are doing today.
Okay, sure thing. So let's start with what I'm doing today and kind of work ourselves. Let's start at what's happening today, then we'll jump all the way back to the beginning and see how I got to where I'm at right now. So currently I'm the owner / partner of we'll call it a technical services company called Fishbone Technical Services. I am a half partner along with my business partner, Robert Summers. So we own the company together. And I say a technical services company and not really use the word systems integrator, because systems integration is a part of what we do. We do other things as well. So obviously we'll focus on the systems integration part of it, but we're kind of multifaceted when it comes to different markets we serve and different technologies we use, things of that nature. So kind of a wide variety of things that we do today. So Fishbone Technical Services, we're a company that's based out of Texas. I actually work remotely out of my home in Minnesota. We're a national company. We do work all over the country. Actually, we've been known to do work in pretty much the Western Hemisphere, Canada, South America, things like that. Just depends upon what the type of work is. We have some opportunities there as well. But we kind of started as we'll call it more of a plant engineering company, where it was more than control systems integration. It was being an extension of our clients' engineering teams, where they have like a building addition or a line addition or some kind of an improvement project, and really we're their project engineers for that type of work. So it's all the way from designing production lines, like packaging lines, filling lines, speccing equipment, writing specifications, qualifying vendors, doing vendor FATs, all for on our client's behalf, and actually laying out the equipment, doing all the mass flow calculations and all the things you do when you put a new line into a production facility. So we do that kind of work. We did that really hot and heavy the first year. After our main big project was done, I kind of went back to my roots and said, I know control systems integration is what I've done for years. Let's go ahead and just kind of parlay that into control systems integration. And we kind of spun that up as well to be, and I'll just call it a traditional control systems integrator, anywhere from starting from field instrumentation to PLC to HMI to SCADA, and then kind of bridging into MES a little bit. So that's what I head up as far as, business partnership goes. That's the part I head up. And then my partner Robert, he does more of still like the plant engineering level stuff. He's a process and mechanical engineer. I'm more electrical and automation. Our claim to fame is we kind of got you covered, when it comes to solving problems. So that's where I am today. We just to back up a second, we started in 2021, so we've been doing this for about 5 years. As far as Fishbone goes, I've been doing it for 30 years as far as a trade, but the Fishbone's been around for about 5 years. So early on, we'll go all the way back. My first adult career was United States Navy. I'm a Navy guy. Did that for a few years, and then worked for the government doing kind of the same thing I was doing in the Navy, mostly, technology type things, electronics, guidance systems, radars, servos, you name it. Anything that was technical was kind of what I was doing.
Were you on the subs in the Navy? I know quite. I guess I
was
know several technicians.
Yeah, I was on a surface ship, destroyers and cruisers mostly, and then I did about of shore duty. I was an instructor for a long time for the Navy as well. And then kind of what we call a tech rep, kind of the subject matter expert that kind of flies around and goes and helps people in different locations around the world. So that was a fun time. But decided to get out of that, and really I was traveling all over the U.S. and I was kind of getting homesick. I'm from the Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota. It's kind of my stomping grounds, original stomping grounds. So wanted to get back home. Took a job with an equipment manufacturer for the semiconductor industry, building, wafer processing tools and chemical management tools and things of that nature. And that was my first bout into not really true systems integration, but getting exposed to PLCs, HMIs, SCADA systems, because they built tools or machines, and those machines got networked, and the data got collected, the data got concentrated, and it rolled up to a SCADA system. So it was my right out of the gate, you're kind of, mimicking your typical, plant structure for control systems, right? Mm-hmm. So it did that for a while, and ended up worked for a manufacturer of automation components. So just to kind of preface kind of the ride that we're on here is my background is I kind of went to a lot of different places of different types of companies to learn a lot of different experiences. And the first one being an OEM, machine or a custom, not a custom machine builder. They actually built dedicated machines, a true machinery OEM. Then I went to a manufacturer of automation components to see how they do business. Then I went to a distributor, so a automation products distributor selling, robotics and servos and PLCs, HMIs, and then went to a custom machine builder. So now it wasn't really your dedicated cookie cutter OEM machines. Now it's like, hey, what's your problem? We'll build a machine for you. And that is an interesting kind of parlay into that company. They were really a true machine shop. They were, CNCs and welders and mechanical designers, and, that's what they did for a living. And they're like, hey, if we want to get into really expand, we have to have systems that are no longer like error logic and push button control. We need PLCs, we need stuff like that. And they contracted me out as kind of their programmer. And then it just grew, and they're like, hey, will you just come on board and just start an automation group for us, and ended up doing that. So built that from the ground up. Built a UL 508 panel shop, so they could build their own panels, and we could build panels for other people as well. But kind of started from nothing and built that up. So that was fun, and kind of, again, my background is I like to build and I like to help. So I go to these companies, kind of build up their automation department. Okay, now you're self-sufficient. I go off and kind of do it at the next place.
I've got I guess multiple questions, right? And I would say, you obviously transitioned at some point into working for yourself, right? So you've mentioned that you were contracting at one place. I'm curious, maybe to expand on that transition a little bit. What pushed you into sort of going off on your own versus maybe finding the next employer, whether like in a similar line of work or maybe continuing to work with some of those companies?
Interesting to be a little tongue in cheek. I finally became unafraid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was one of those where you kind of were thinking about it over the years. Some people are gung ho and they're ready to just jump in and do it. Other people are like, yeah, I'm a little timid. You kind of have that little bit of that engineering mentality. It's like, if I don't have every, T crossed and every I dotted, I'm not going to do it. So everything's got to kind of be, all the stars have to align. And I learned you can't do that. You have to be able to take some risk, and you got to kind of go on faith and know that you've got a good plan and just make the jump and do it. So I had a lot of fun building departments or automation groups at different places. And I guess finally, a couple of things. One is I was like, well, if you can do this for other people, why can't you do it for yourself, right? So that was a big part of it. And in really going back to the stars aligning, I had met my future business partner at a company I was working at, and that leaning on somebody a little bit and them leaning on you really helps. So it was one of those where just kind of a funny story where we're on a fishing trip. We're on a fishing vacation in Mexico, and we wake up one morning, get our coffee, go out on the balcony, look at the bay and enjoy the scenery and the warmth, and just said, hey, we should start our own company. And by the end of the day, we had a company registered in the state of Texas, and we were on our way. So it just took that, sitting down and saying, we can do this. I mean, we know how this is done. So we just built the confidence up to take the leap, and we ended up doing it. So, and we always have that fallback. I mean, you don't want to always have this, you want to have a safety net, but you don't want to rely on a safety net. Is sure. Hey, if this doesn't work, we can go somewhere and find work. It's not that big of a deal, right?
Right.
So
let me ask you a follow-up on that front, right? And you've mentioned this earlier as you were explaining, I guess, building up the departments for some of these companies, right? And I personally, at least, have wrestled with the idea throughout my career, whether you take especially in larger companies, right? You have this very technical track where you can become a systems architect, and you're now responsible for knowing all sorts of details, and you're able to implement a lot of the systems, versus going the managerial route where you're spending most of the time, either leading people or managing departments. So I'm curious to hear maybe like your thoughts going from building departments. Now you're starting your own practice. Are you still very hands-on? Are you basically still managing people and those relationships? Or how did you maybe manage the two side of things as you transitioned into your own venture?
It definitely is a dichotomy, right? I mean, it's you want to be, they say are you working in the business or on the business, right? It's like, where are you spending your time? As a young company, it was just me and my business partner. Well, you're double duty, right? We're both in and on the business. So, which is manageable, but as you grow, now it's like you have to be more on the business, and you have to do recruiting, and you have to have a company handbook, and you have to have an accounting system, and you have to have this, and you have to have that. And there's a lot of work that has to be done with that. We're still small enough to where I do wear both hats. So both in a managerial, kind of run the company with my business partner, but then also we are both heavy duty in the weeds on projects. And we can do that with the size of company we are, but as we grow, that's going to have to change. And I know that as I built departments, I saw that as well. The more you grow, the more, they always say, the more you grow, the more it's about the people rather than the work, right? Now you have to build teams, you have to foster teams, you have to build something, right? Rather than just going doing projects. It's a whole different mindset. So it really depends on where you are in that growth pattern. And mine was always a means to an end. As an owner, and as a new owner, you put in the hours, right? You got to spend the time, and you have to do the double duty until you can justify, expanding that and offloading that work to somebody else, which is good because, at the end of the day, I love doing the work more than running the company, to be honest with you. But it's they're both necessary, right? So our model is if you were to take your classic organization, and if you have like one or two system architects, then you have more, designers and programmers and, people that are kind of working on the day to day. I would be the systems architect in our arrangement right now.
Gotcha.
So, and I was in previous spots too. My previous occupation or place where I worked, we had 22 people in our department. So it was not, I couldn't be in the day to day, but at the end of the day, if somebody needed to architect a complex system, I was still involved with that. But as soon after it was architected, it was passed off. And then we had enough people at varying levels that could monitor the day to day, so I didn't have to. They were, we'll call them junior architects. They weren't quite at the systems level, but in their specialty, they were architects, right? So you could kind of, hey, you take the PLC and make sure that gets done right. You might use two or three people to write the lines of code, but they were kind of responsible for making sure that everything came together at the end. And then ultimately that would have to plug into my systems architecture vision. So
let me ask you, I guess, one last question before I pass the mic to Dave, right? And this is maybe more of a fundamental definition that I think in our industry is a little bit vague, right? How do you define a systems integrator? Because as you've mentioned a little bit earlier, it's anything from, it could be building panels, it could be building entire lines, it could be focused on PLCs and HMIs, just like it could be on the data aspects. And I know that in software industries, it could be even tying applications, inside of the hyperscalers like the AWSs, the Azures, etc. So I guess, like, could you expand maybe or explain your definition, but also explain a bit more, like, what are you touching like these days when it comes to that integration stack, perhaps?
Yeah. So, I mean, that term or that phrase, control system integrator, has definitely evolved over the years. And, I have a more of a traditional definition of that, but it gets, expanded beyond that as well. I mean, when I say a traditional control systems integrator, it is typically SCADA and below. You're working you're on the plant floor, you're designing control systems, panels, you're writing PLC code. Usually there's two frames of thought here. One is you're integrating somebody else's equipment, meaning you have a production line and you have, a mixer, a dough mixer, a dough sheeter, a former, all these different pieces of equipment, a proofing oven, all the OEMs build their individual piece of equipment, but nobody controls it as a complete line. And that's the integration. That is integrating other people's equipment into a complete system. They call it, typically line control or, SCADA level supervisory control. We do a lot of that. We don't build machines. I mean, we work with people that build machines, but we don't build them. So we're integrating other people's equipment, or it's a big process like a material handling, like an aggregate or a grain handling or something like that, where there's a lot of equipment suppliers, but they're not PLC controlled. They have a motor on them and that's about it. Maybe some sensors and things like that. And then you integrate those back to a plant level control system. So in that case, you are controlling the individual equipment and doing the line control all at once. So that's kind of my definition of a traditional control systems integrator. But now with, newer things people are chasing, the whole, 4.0 ventures, and everybody's talking data and programming and this and that. And now you're talking about a whole different animal. A lot of people are double dipping and doing both traditional systems integration and doing that type of work. We do as well to a degree, but we're not like going, full force into that, because, we have our sweet spot, and there's plenty of work out there for that sweet spot. And what we do is we learn the new technologies, we learn where the industry's going, and kind of dovetail into that, but quickly know when we're out of our realm and say, hey, these guys need a enterprise level solution for data. We have partners that we can call in to say, hey, you guys come and take a look at this. We can get you up to the SCADA, maybe MES level, but beyond that, we'll call somebody in to take it over from there. And how that helps us is it helps us build our control systems. I mean, we've all seen the spaghetti code and the nothing normalized, and just tag names are all over the place. And if you kind of know where people should be going, you can build the foundation for them. You don't have to get them to that level just yet, but you're building a piece of the foundation to get them there. So when you're delivering a solution, 5 years later, they can say, hey, we're going to go to the next step. It's like, hey, we're ready. It's already kind of geared up for that. So I know I kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but I don't know if I answered your question completely as far as what's my definition of a systems integrator, but I still use the again called the traditional systems integrator as the core. Everything else is kind of an offshoot from that, right? And I mean, nowadays you got to be careful about just using the term automation, because somebody says, oh, that's banking automation, or that's financial automation, or that's so you got to really be careful using that term nowadays. So you have to qualify it with which market are you in. So
absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in, Rich. Otherwise, I think Vlad is going to go ask questions for the rest of the show. But no, I think it's an interesting definition of systems integration, and you brought up a lot of different verticals, right? And I agree there are lots of different verticals within integration, and there are groups who are good at each vertical, and sometimes we meander off into other verticals which we may or may not be as good. Going back towards some of your early experience in the first 3 or 4 service providers that you were building before going over and starting Fishbone, can you take us through maybe the first group that you started? I think you said you were a programmer and then you came on board full time, and then you built out the automation group. Can you take us through maybe the experience of doing that the first time versus the experience of doing it for the second or third time in different groups? Were there lots of learnings that you were able to go take from the first time that you were successful and bring it to the second one, or because they were different verticals and different types of organizations you were in, it was a lot of relearning over and over again?
Yeah, definitely there were building blocks for sure. I mean, the foundation's the same. I mean, you are trying to automate something, right? And it was always, PLC, HMI, SCADA level stuff. Machine builders, typically you stop at the HMI, but it was PLC program. No, the style of PLC programming changes, right? And you got machinery, sequence control, you have batch control. What's the style, but still the foundation is similar. I mean, you can kind of use it as a springboard into the next area that you get into. I'd say probably the biggest difference between the different, we'll call them the venues I was in, machine builder, distributor, and we'll call it a true systems integrator, was really your market and what are you trying to sell, so to speak. So when you're at a machine builder, you're selling machines. You're not selling controls, really. I mean, you are to a degree, you're selling some differentiating technologies maybe that you have, but it's really the machine you're selling. So if I have a machine that's an assembly machine, that's the code you write is for an assembly machine. So it was always the machine kind of was the dog and the controls was the tail. You're kind of like, whatever we're building, we have to put automation on that. Now, as a machine builder, they have their specialties. Are they liquid filling machines? Are they packaging machines? Are they assembly machines? Are they robotics? Are they just typical servos? I mean, they'll tend to have their niche, and you kind of get in the groove that this is the type of programs that we have to write for the machines that we build. And then I had a group that was, it's not really a systems integration group. It's more like an application engineering group for a distributor, because you're not really building solutions, you're building toolkits for other people to make solutions when you're at work at a distributor, right? You're usually not the one that has to be there doing the 16-hour-a-day startups to make the thing work. You're just giving somebody the tools to do that, to be able to do that kind of work. Like, how do you integrate product A with product B? And when you're at a distributor, that you're kind of, I'll make it sound kind of bad, which it's not, but you're kind of handcuffed by the products that you sell, right? So you are limited in the fact that I'm selling this PLC, this HMI, this servo controller, this robot. So I'm going to integrate those, and I'm going to show my customer how easy it is to integrate those so they can just hit the ground running. We sell the product. And that's the whole purpose of a distributor, is selling products, right? So that's a whole, but you're still learning, protocols and, how to interface stuff. I mean, that was invaluable experience because, again, I'll make this sound bad, but to take a all one vendor solution, that's easy to integrate, right? They should already have the tools and the hooks and the, it's taken, a solution of 4 different major component areas, and they're all from a different vendor. That's a challenge sometimes. But that's what gets you good at integration. It's like, because you're not always going to have that single vendor thing. You're going to have, hey, we standardize on this for our PLCs, but our HMIs are this, or our servo controls are this, and you got to now integrate those. I mean, I have a common one. It's, they have a different VFD that they standardize than their PLC. Well, we all know nowadays, if you buy your VFD from your PLC guy, it's kind of nicely integrated, right?
Yeah.
But you have to be able to. That's where true integration comes in. Is how do I make these unlike products talk together?
Absolutely.
Then I think with the as I progressed in my career, that became frustrating to me a little bit. It's like, I want to give you a solution, but I'm limited in what I can do. So I progressively opened that product basket up as I went, right? Eventually you get to a systems integrator, it's like the world's your oyster. It's like, what do you, if you can find somebody to sell it to, you can use it in a solution, right? So.
Yep. When I was an applications engineer for a couple of years, the products that we had where you could use anything you wanted out of the products that you distributed. And so there were some wild solutions and applications that we had in there. And some of them I look back now 10 years later thinking that was amazing. And other times I'm like, I really don't understand. I don't understand how we came to this. Like, it probably wasn't even the best product to use within the product lineup that we had. And maybe we used it because we had to go check boxes on the 5th banner that we needed to be able to go ahead and showcase the product because every one of the major groups wanted something in there. And so it was certainly an interesting. It was certainly interesting when you leave distribution, as to what you said, Rich. The world is certainly your oyster. Right, wrong, or indifferent, you can go do anything.
Right.
Hopefully you make better choices.
Yeah, your limitation's really your client. Any specifications that they might have, and that's where you become more of a consultant to a degree. You can educate and say, well, have you thought about this product and this product? Not really, just randomly throwing products out there, but if it's something that you're confident in and know you can solve the problem with, that's part of your responsibilities to educate, right? Let your customer know that not everything has to be this. Okay, here are some other options for you.
Absolutely. Let me ask, Chris, kind of transitioning into the work that you've been doing with Fishbone. You had talked a little bit about the motivating factors being you realized that you were now ready, or you and your business partner realized you're now ready to go ahead and do it for yourself after having been successful in several other instances in the past. This being your 4th or 5th time you've built a service provider, what were some of those building blocks that you brought with you that gave you the confidence other than having done it several times in the past? Was it the knowledge of how we go sell things? Was it the knowledge of how we go architect things? What were some of those building blocks? And maybe I'm going to phrase it for some of the listeners out there who are considering starting their own service provider. What were some of the most valuable building blocks that you brought with you?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost, it was knowing you're going to have business.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, do you just blindly go and do a startup and then hope you get business, or do you kind of, hey, I've got kind of I know what's going on. I've got all these contacts in the industry. I know if I've always done right by them in the past, so I know if I go off and do my own thing, I'll be able to get business. Of course, you have non-competes and non-disclosures, stuff like that usually, I've always, protected that as well. It's like I never would go off of, previous, work that I did until, 3 years later, 2 years later,
Yeah.
whatever. And eventually, if you had those contacts and you did good by them, really you don't even have to go find them; they come and find you. You know, it's really the level of network and relationships that you have, right? So the biggest part was just knowing that we had a high likelihood of getting work to get us going.
Yep.
The seed money, so to speak, right? You got to get some work to kind of get the thing moving, and that. And I think that almost hurt us in a way, because we were very confident we were going to get a very big project, which
Yep.
almost led to, I don't want to say overconfidence, but we maybe skipped a couple steps that we should have done in a true startup, where it's like, hey, we should just go. And it worked out, right? We retroactively, you can go back and put the things in place that you need to put in place. But if you're a little more methodical, you have all that plan written out, and everything's kind of, in a nice package, and away you go. So, but coming from an integrator background, sometimes you just don't have that. I mean, we kind of have both sides of the brain. One is a very, regimented type. Another one's just the entrepreneurial side. Let's just dive in and do it, because we'll figure it out. So you kind of have both things, and they sometimes complement and sometimes they contradict. So.
And I also think that things very rarely go to plan, right? Even in systems integrations, but in business as well, you have to an extent. I like the saying "rolling with the punches," right? When you show up to a lot of these like manufacturing sites, again on the technical side, you are bound to see constraints that you were not exposed to in the past, right? So I think the same applies to business. You can write a business plan, but ultimately, once rubber meets the road is when you have to truly adapt and figure things out.
Yeah, and where that helps is having, having systems architect type mentality, where we can take on a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be this type of machine with this type of PLC. You're really narrowing your focus, and that can be good, but for us, it's not. We have to be able to respond to issues no matter what they are. So anyway, go ahead.
And let me ask you, I guess, a follow-up on that side, right? Because I ultimately, like I said, have wrestled with this thought over the years myself. There's obviously a couple of brands that dominate the industrial, I would say, control systems, at least market. And there's a lot of other vendors that provide fairly good solutions, but the sales are what usually causes the friction, right? I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier. You can't just come into a manufacturer with an established install base and propose to replace, let's call it this very large control system with something else, despite it being maybe even technically better, right? So I guess what I'm trying to understand, what are your thoughts on kind of figuring out the specific maybe niche, and at what point maybe have you started turning down some of the projects and to focus really, this is the core that we're doing, this is what we would like to work with, we're not going to try and support these maybe edge cases, if you will?
Yeah. I guess I didn't catch the first part of that. It was more around products and, mainstream products, as opposed to, I don't know if you call them third-party products or maybe not so well-known products. Was there something in the question about that, or was it more about, what kind of work you go after?
I would say, it's a twofold question, right? So obviously I'm curious on like the sales side, like how do you find work that's relevant for your like practice, but also how do you like guardrail some of that work? Because again, as you've mentioned, in systems integration, you can be thrown in a project that is completely outside of, again, like the ecosystem that you're working on.
Yeah, we do. When you're a new company, you tend to be a little hungrier and a little more diverse in the type of work that you're going to accept. I do caution against that. I mean, I think everybody kind of does it, but what you don't want to do is get in over your head and make a bad name for yourself right out of the gate. So, be a little more cognizant of yes, this is a project I can handle and be successful with it, or have a plan B. Have that expert contractor that you have that you can call in and help, rescue you if things go sideways, because it's something that you're not familiar with. One of the things that we're not real good at. And then, unfortunately, this is kind of the demise of a lot of companies that can't ride through it. And it is the sales and marketing side of things. I mean, you get a lot of like, your typical controls engineer, like, okay, I'm a senior controls engineer. I'm going to go off and do my own thing, even if it's a one-man show, or you're just going to kind of do your own thing, and that can work. But the problem you have is, while you are knee deep or neck deep into Studio 5000 or some kind of a programming software, nobody's getting you the next job. So when that job stops, then there you sit, and now I got to go find some more work, and you got hills and valleys. That's always the struggle. Well, even with a small company, you have that. I mean, you still, you got to be juggling many things. You got to be working on the projects in the backlog that you have, but you still got to be looking for, okay, what happens, 6 months from now? What happens a year from now? Because sometimes projects take that long to come to fruition, right? I mean, I've got some I'm working on for 2 years that are getting close to hitting, but still haven't. They're just, some of them take a long time. So you have to have, your typical sales strategy is fill the hopper full of qualified potentials, because you're not going to get all those. They're going to filter down, and you're going to get a subset of those. So you need to figure out what that is to make sure you keep that full. Now, the reason why we've been able to kind of be okay without having a full-blown sales effort is just, Robert and I have both been in the industry for 30 years. We have a lot of contacts. We know a lot of people. We have people we've done business with in the past. So even though we're not cold calling necessarily, we know just people, hey, pick up the phone, talk to this company you did work for, 15 years ago or wherever. And you find out they moved to a different company, and now they have some opportunity, and it kind of just organic growth. And it's been pretty good, but we are at that point now where, okay, that's our good baseline. Now we need to go to the next level, which is more of a dedicated sales and marketing effort. So, as you grow, you got to know when to change gears a little bit. But you're always, I used to be in sales. That was my first foray into systems integration, by the way, was in sales. So you fill the hopper with the low-hanging fruit. You just get the hopper full, and then work on the long-term stuff, building the relationships with your clients, and moving on from there. We definitely qualify our projects. I mean, there are certain industries we just stay out of because, for one, either we don't like them, not in a disparaging way, just it's not our forte, or we're not good at them. Meaning, I believe if you could get good at them, but we're not going to spend the time to get good at them. There's already people that serve that market well. They'll, they do a good job. Just let them do that. So we tend to fit more in the line control, like I explained earlier. You have a factory that's got a bunch of OEM machines and making all that stuff work together. We do a lot of that. We do a lot of like process control, like boilers, hot water, pumps, valves, pressures, temperatures, all that, flows, all that kind of good stuff. And a lot of times those don't have OEM controls on them. They're a package that's built custom, and then we put the controls over top of it. And material handling, a lot of that's not an OEM PLC controlled stuff. It's somebody else is providing all the conveyors and all the processing equipment, and then we do the automation over top of it. So
let me ask you, Richie, a follow-up on that side, right? When it comes to sales, perhaps with a not as full of a network as you do have, right? And when you're reaching out for some of these projects, I've heard basically different schools of thought, right? Some of the I guess comments that I have heard is that you should be coming in and basically doing some of the maintenance work in order to then expand into doing more controls. On the flip side, I know integrators that have approached it from sort of like top-down approach. We only want to sell into these larger consulting, strategic type of opportunities to then also provide, the services necessary to do the integration. So I'm curious, obviously, what you're doing on your side, but also if you have some advice for those that are following your footsteps, maybe a couple of years, maybe several decades behind, and are trying to figure out, do I reach out to this plant and tell them I'm going to come in and just troubleshoot some PLCs so then we can get maybe some larger line work? or do I come in and try and advise them on something a little bit
Yeah.
larger right out of the gate?
That is such a great and tough question to answer. It's very, in my mind, it's very conditional, and the holy grail is both, but it's hard to do both, right? You're coming in from the bottom and you're coming in from the top. You're doing more of your capital projects. You're doing your more of your maintenance work. Ideally, you're touching both if you can, because it's really what's the first one to open the door, and whoever's got the problem at the time. If there's no capital projects going on, coming in from the top is going to be tough. So, but eventually there will be. So do you bide your time by doing some maintenance work? I mean, that is the strategy, right? You can do that. I do caution against spreading yourself too thin, though. I mean, because I've always said I'd rather have, and this is just me. I mean, everybody's got their own school of thought. Is I'd rather have one $100,000 project than 10 $10,000 projects. It's just one project management cycle, one just set of everything. It's just easier to manage, and I can set. It's just a comfort level that I've got some. I got revenue coming in for this project. I got people I can assign to it. It's just a better comfort level with stuff like that. Not to say we're not going to do those $10,000 projects. We do them all the time. It's just if I was given the choice, that would be the ideal. When you're already in a lot of capital projects, that's kind of you're humming along and you're kind of doing that. Doing maintenance work sometimes, what's that doing for you for like maybe a new client? If it's a means to an end and you can justify that, I'd say do it. The tough thing about that is you got to make sure it's not diluting your efforts, because we all know it's like, especially if you're doing troubleshooting, just to spin up your mind and get your head wrapped around something takes time. And if you were assigned to a capital project and you're right in the middle of programming and you had to pull off of that and then you had to retool your brain to work on a vision system troubleshooting thing, and you were working on a pump control over here, it's hard, and it distracts you. Not that you can't do it. It can be done. I've done it a bunch, but I can just tell you what the adverse effects of that are. And then now you get that troubleshooting thing done, and now you got to go back to your pump project and you're like, oh man, where did I leave off? And you got to, did I do that? Did I not do that? You kind of, it takes you a while to get back up and running again. And now the budget on that project suffers because you took longer to spin back up again. So it's very conditional, and it's really, how well you can shift between those different things efficiently, I think plays a factor. But you really have to look at, what the goal is. I mean, if it's, taking on work just to take on work, you don't really need it. I'd qualify it a little bit more. I mean, there's another mindset of it's in your top 5 clients, and they want me to do maintenance. I'm probably going to tool up to do maintenance because they're going to take me to multiple plants, and it's going to be another revenue stream for me, knowing. But you have to know that that's a totally different business model than doing capital projects, right? So you can't just take the same group and the same processes and try to serve both masters, right? You have to make it, a concerted effort that, okay, we are now going to be a troubleshooting field service type of company and a traditional systems integrator that does capital projects.
Absolutely.
So whenever you have that different thing, you have to make a concerted effort and have a plan around it. Just don't try to take the same solution and put it everywhere. It's you're gonna beat your head against the wall.
Absolutely. If I can go add on to that, Rich. So like the switching between one style of project and another style of project, I've heard some people refer to that as like context switching, and it absolutely causes both of those style of projects to struggle. I certainly know some people who are very successful when it comes to doing maintenance and troubleshooting in some of those. Most of the time you see them focused on kind of one area, and then again, to your point, most of the time you see the other groups doing capital projects or advisory or control systems only, very focused on another group. It would go to like a very large integration company or service provider before you see multiple groups. And to your point, maybe if a group had time, and the concept is, do we go find some maintenance work for this person to do, or do we lay them off? Then you go find the maintenance person or maintenance work for the person to do. But to go after both projects, I more times than not see groups who come in at the bottom struggle to get higher up within the ecosystem of those individual plants and facilities, because if they think, hey, Dave is the guy that we call to do maintenance, or like maintenance on a very specific thing, like that's how that you're saved in their phones. That's how you're saved everywhere. They don't think of, hey, let's call Dave to go do the next $250,000 capital project as he's done so well for us on like valve maintenance in the past. And so I've seen
that's what I'm calling Dave for valve maintenance from now on.
That is actually what that is one of the many things Vlad calls Dave for, but that is a different issue. That is absolutely a different issue.
And that can work if you have a sales and marketing effort that springboards off of that. If you, in the problem a lot of us in the industry have is, I don't understand why they're not hiring me. I know this stuff like the back of my hand. Well, they don't know that. You know that, but they don't know that. So you have to educate people, and that's sales and marketing, right? You have to, when you're in there talking to the maintenance guy, it's like, okay, well, who does the maintenance person report to? Okay, well, the maintenance manager. Who's the maintenance manager report to? They, report to operations, or learn who they are, and you got to get your name out there and say, you're not just the one that finds the loose wire anymore. You're the one that, hey, I can do a lot of the stuff for you, because you're absolutely right. You will be known as the cleanup guy until you prove otherwise. And they're always going to call the people that they're used to calling. We'll call the big guns to come in and take care of the big projects. So.
Absolutely. Rich, let me ask a little bit about growth. And so typically we've been asking our guests about like the first and second hire that they've had for their company. You having gone through and built up service providers several different times. Maybe can we talk about what the first hire and the second hire looked like at the original company that you were building the automation side up for? And was that different than the first or second hire that you had when you started Fishbone?
Yeah, I've gone the whole spectrum on this, as far as what's the right model, and it really depends on who you are and what your capabilities are, and what what model you want to select. If you want to be a company owner and you want to be hands off, obviously you got to hire senior people that can be that systems architect. And now you have to make sure not only do you have somebody that can be a systems architect, but is also has the personality to be a mentor and can guide people and teach people, because there's different people out there, right? There are people that hold stuff close to the vest, and there are people that are like, what do you want to know? I'll tell you, and I'll teach you, and I'll bring you along, and love doing that. And you have to have that level of if you're not that type of person, you have to have somebody in the company that is that type of person. Everybody working in a vacuum for themselves will not work. I hate to do things in absolutes, but that's one I feel pretty strongly about, that maybe you can make it work, but odds are it's going to be dysfunctional, and it's not going to be fun for anybody. So early on, it's a little more, I wasn't in the day-to-day engineering part of it. It was more about running the department. I had to have those senior people to be able to, if not 100%, maybe 80-90% handle a project, and I would fill in the gaps where I needed to. Here, at Fishbone, it's a little bit different. I really did want to get back into the engineering side of it, so I kind of, fit that position right now of the architect and the mentor. So I tend to, hire junior engineers. And they call it growing your own, right? It's like, hey, just come on board and we'll teach you, and you'll learn kind of, I don't want to make it sound cultish, but our way of doing things, because everybody's got their way of doing things, right? It's like, everybody at the end of the day is still solving the same problem, but everybody kind of goes about it doing it a little bit different fashion. So, when you're hiring people, it's very, I always boil it down to desire, attitude and aptitude.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got the desire to want to do this work, because everybody knows being a controls or an automation engineer, we're a unique bunch. I mean, we just are. There's nothing else like it. I mean, how many times have you gone to a neighborhood party and somebody asks you what you do and you just kind of look at them with a stare look on your, I don't even know how to explain this. And then if you do, they don't know what you're talking about. So, I mean, it's very, very unique. So you have to have the desire to be in that work environment. It's very gratifying and very challenging. And, there's hills and valleys. It's a roller coaster ride. There's nice casual programming, sitting in air conditioned room days. And there's days where you're like, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to handle it here. It's so hot and dusty and sweaty and just not good. And, all you think about is that controls engineer with a laptop in their hand and they're walking around, one-handed trying to program something. I mean, it's definitely challenging. So, it's knowing, being upfront when you're trying to hire somebody. It's like, hey, this is the world we live in. It's a lot of, it can be, you're designing, you're in AutoCAD, you're in your programming software. There's plenty of that, right? Office work, go home at night, just 9-to-5 job, we'll call it. But then there's, when it's go time, it's go time, and that's a shift, right? It's like, oh, I'm not used to that, but that's part of the job, right? It's like when a plant's down, all hands on deck, as we used to say in the Navy. everybody just, we got to do what we got to do to get it done. So you have to be upfront with that, and some people enjoy that, and some people aren't amenable to that. So you have to get that out there right away. That's the desire part of it, and the attitude part of it is just, I want to, that goes along with desire. It's like, I want to learn. And they're like, hey, just soak up information. Anything you put in front of people, they just kind of want to learn more and more. That's kind of my method is, I always used, tell the story of being in a conference call with somebody, and somebody will say something. I have no idea what that term was or what that technology was. I didn't at that moment, but tomorrow I will. So, tomorrow I will research the heck out of that. I'll learn what that is. And the next conference call, I'm going to know what I'm talking about, type of thing. So that's what I mean by desire and attitude. And then the aptitude part of it is, do you have the aptitude to be able to do this type of work? Because not everybody does. Not everybody's wired the same. And if you've got the aptitude to learn and retain and, build your toolkit, so to speak, that's great for junior engineers. If you get that, sky's the limit, right? So
let me ask you a follow-up question on that side, right? So the challenge, at least for me over the years, has also been the customer side, right? Because ultimately you need to be able to feed that newly minted engineer with work, or even if they're a senior, right, like systems architect, you need to make sure that they're busy. And whether they're coming in as a contractor or an employee, it's important to have the conversation with the customer. And to be quite honest with you, right, and as I'm sure you've had in the past, most customers, once you've worked with them, they only want you, right? Like they're like, well, where's Rich? We want only Rich. So how do you maybe make that sale, make that transition, make that, turnaround where you explain to them and sell to them this new person?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I've been through this 100 times. I mean, just it happens all the time. And what's not fair to the conversation is, I was always the constant there. So it's always, because it was the work I was doing, right? So, how did I get, I was doing the work, or even if I wasn't, it was one of the senior engineers, and either they left the company or they're not available anymore. And now we got to bring somebody else in. Well, for me, it was me making sure I had the relationship and I could smooth that over and say, look, I got you. At the end of the day, I'm still responsible, but we have to get other people in here to do this work. That's just the way companies are built, right? You don't necessarily have to say it that way, but that's kind of the gist of it, right? It's just nature of the beast. And if you do it the right way, it all fixes itself. If you don't extend somebody beyond what their capabilities are, you're going to have a higher success rate, right? If you just send somebody out that knows VFDs and motor starters and all. You send them out for a vision application. I'm like, all right, they're not going to be very successful, right? You got to have the right foundation there. Other things I've done is, I don't necessarily send people out on a startup by themselves. I usually go with.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's not because I'm looking over somebody. It's just playing, interference, keeping things going, making sure the electrical guy's doing his part, making sure the mechanical guy's doing their part, and just kind of making sure the client's doing their part, and just, giving them status updates. Everybody's been there with their head down in their laptop and somebody's chirping over their shoulder saying, when are you going to be done? When are you going to be done? And I intercept those things and just say, okay, let's go talk. Let's go get a cup of coffee and I'll tell you where we're at, and let him just kind of, let that person just, continue on with what they're doing. So it's making sure you don't overextend the people that you put on there, but then also being involved. And if you do it right, within the first week, instead of you getting a call, they're getting the call. I have it happening right now, where I thought, the ego party is like, you want that phone call, right? You want to be proud of that. You want to be the go-to person. But as an owner, you're like, hey, when I really succeeded is when that phone call is going to somebody else. And the client, not because they have to, but because that's who they chose to call. Now they're being the solution for that client rather than you being that. And that's a tough step for people too, because they want to be the hero. They want to be the solution. And you can't grow from, 0 to 10 people or whatever you want with that mentality. You have to find a way to we'll call it let go. It's, you still got to, still have your oversight, still have your checks and balances, still have, be involved to make sure that we're not, nothing's getting messed up. But the sooner you can relinquish control, the more healthy the company's going to be, and the more you're going to be able to scale it and grow. And I learned that.
Absolutely.
Actually, probably somebody that's listening on here will tell you the same story of, because he used to work for me, is I was too involved. Even simple questions people would come in and ask, they just wanted the approval. It's like, hey, is this the right thing to do? Is this the right thing? And I didn't let people make their own decisions. Not that I was forcing them to come to me, but it's just kind of the culture was, well, let's make sure, Rich takes a look at it and approves it before we move on. And people were not taking any risk or taking any initiative. It was just kind of, I was the bottleneck, and it was keeping us from growing. And, again, you have to have a healthy balance of that. Certainly if you're, if you put the right design reviews in place and stuff like that, it doesn't have to be me. If you're doing a safety circuit and somebody designs it and you have somebody else that's a safety expert, they can be your design reviewer, let them review it. Doesn't have to be me. So.
Absolutely. I have seen in more than one instance where the technical leader of an organization was the bottleneck and the reason why the organization was physically unable to grow because everything ran through that one person, and the ego or ability to let that to remove themselves from some of those parts were the kind of core failure of the organization and lack of growth. And I think you gave a bunch of fantastic examples of how to go expand people on site or people working with a particular customer. One other thing that we do is we always try to have backups when we're doing a project. We always try to have more than one person, hopefully more than one person not named Dave, visible for the projects. And we explain it to the clients as basically it allows more people on the team to go understand what's going on in the project. So if something were to happen and the primary person were to be on vacation or they were in the middle of another project and couldn't get to it, it allows multiple other people to have visibility. And generally they're happy to have more than one person have visibility, and all of us are happy that there's more than one person who has an idea of what's going on with the project, because the call always comes when they're on vacation and unreachable or something something along those lines.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I just did a simple 2-pump lift station, pretty simple, right? And we sent 3 people, including myself. And it wasn't because we needed to, it's because we wanted to. and it was a learning thing. We had a newer engineer. It's like, hey, learn, shadow us so you learn how we kind of do startups and things like that. And of course, then I went because it was a client that you're building a relationship with, and you want to, show your presence and your support there. But yeah, it was way overkill for what we needed, but it was an investment, right? It's part of your training program, as far as I'm concerned, because there's nothing beats, on-site exposure. It's where you really learn. So.
Absolutely.
100%. Go ahead.
It's where you learn and where you figure out how the training and education of some of the junior or some of the non-junior engineers is going, and if you can go put them in front of clients all by themselves.
Absolutely.
Right? That is the hope. But until they've been on site with other people that you know and trust, you're not going to go hand them a plane ticket and tell them good luck.
Right.
Rich, I do want to follow up. Go ahead, Rich. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. Go
ahead. I was going to ask you a slightly different question. I know that we're already past the hour, but I do want to ask you a forward-looking, where is integration heading type of a question. I know there's quite a few, I would say, changes, right? And maybe they're, to various degrees, are changing the industry. There's obviously AI. I would say that you've mentioned this, there's more of a industry 4.0 / UNS / data appetite. There's also, at least from what I'm seeing, a lot of distributors getting into integration more so than ever before and trying to provide services that usually integrators would provide. So I'm curious, where do you see integration heading maybe in the next couple of years to 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think the distributors getting into integration, I see that as interesting. It can be a little bit of a conflict, but it can be for them a means to an end, because especially if you're not the handful of flagship products that are out there. So if you represent maybe to be blunt about it, a second tier, or even if it's a superior product, but in the market, it's just, okay, people are not buying that, they're buying this. So to find integrators just to go integrate your stuff, it's like, oh, well, I don't know that, and I got to learn it, and it's going to cost me money to learn how to integrate it, and it might be a one-off. It's not going to be 10 projects of this. It's tough for a distributor to find an integrator to do that type of work for them. Because I was a distributor, and I had challenges with that, and that's why I ended up we didn't really do systems integration, but boy, we come close. In fact, we would actually, custom machine builder actually would contract us. It's like, hey, we bought this robot from you. You know how to program it. Will you just come and program this for us? So you're kind of, dancing on the edge there a little bit. I can talk about the commercial side of that. I mean, as an integrator, you always kind of shrug a little bit and roll your eyes when you have the people you're buying your components from be your competitor as well. That's a little bit of a challenge. It might be a lot of a challenge for some people. I mean, it gets pretty intense in some areas, but more and more companies are buying up integrators, right? So they're like, they want to put it all under one roof and do their own thing, which is fine. So as far as what I see, I mean, that's one of the things that I see. I still think distributors are going to probably, it's going to be I want to call it a survival tactic, but that's the thing that comes to mind is, hey, if we want to sell these products, if we're not going to find an integrator that we can hitch our wagon to integrate this for our customers, we're going to have to do it ourselves. So I still think that's going to be out there. And then, I see what I see today. I see a big group of integrators, chasing the next thing, right? Like, and that's not a bad thing. That's how we evolve and we invent new things and we get better. Is, you're always going to have a subset of society that's going to go chase the next up and coming thing, and then you're going to have other people that are like, hey, this is our core. This is what we do for a living. We're really good at it. Let's just keep chunking away at doing this. I think that's going to get more and more. I think there's going to be, and you're already seeing it. You're seeing integrators like, hey, 4.0 is the thing. Let's go and shift and let's start doing that. Data is the thing. Let's go shift there. Let's, when I worked for a contractor, it's renewable energy. Let's go chase renewable energy. And now data centers. Let's go chase data centers, and that's fine, and we need people to do that. Me personally, I'm like, this is what we do, and there's a market there, and it's going to be there for a long time. I'm still now doing a PLC 5 conversion. I'm like, good Lord. I mean, there's stuff out there that that's just there's a lot of people that aren't ready for this up and coming stuff. They're not even at 3.0. For Christ's sake.
Nothing wrong with PLC 5s. I still have multiple clients that are running PLC 5s.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Other than getting parts and the price it costs to replace it. So, I mean, that's where you run into problems.
Rich, I've got one saved at my parents' house for retirement. It's slowly,
Nice.
Accruing that value that I asked the customer that I pulled it away from like multiple years ago to have it in there. Yes, that's just going to go to salvage otherwise. But yes, there's still a lot of plants that run those control systems. And I'm even, I'm mostly worried with the newer generations that are going to be trained on, only Studio 5000. Once they go to some of those networks, it's Data Highway Plus, like DeviceNet still, it's going to be a challenge for a lot of these manufacturers, right? And a lot of time it's very complex projects, and they're only going to get more complex because there is no more documentation being released. So I'm not sure if AI is going to be helpful at all on that front, but I do have my doubts. So we'll see how it goes.
Showing my age here a little bit, but anybody out there's got some DeviceNet problems, you got my number. I mean, I cut my teeth on DeviceNet when it first came out. So, and I just, again, a year ago, just did an upgrade on DeviceNet and didn't change to another protocol, just changed to newer components. They still are DeviceNet. And
I love that.
And you have to look at it, you look at these projects, and that's a, when you go back to, hiring employees and the attitude, the environment, things like that. It's like anybody looking at that project would go, why are you taking DeviceNet and upgrading it to DeviceNet? Why are you not going from DeviceNet to Ethernet or this or that? Well, companies have budgets. Companies.
It's a much bigger jump.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge job. And they're like, I mean, there's just rows and rows and rows of MCCs with DeviceNet. And to just say, well, tomorrow we're going to change it all to Ethernet is not practical. Now, I would concede you should probably have a plan, a 10-year plan or something that says we should eventually change this out. But today that plan's not here. And Rockwell still sells plenty of DeviceNet stuff. I mean, it's still there. So you have to weigh the, what's the right answer. And really that project was, okay, the gateway is obsolete. We have to change the gateways. So that was really what it boiled down to. So.
Hank, who's probably still in the chat and watching us live, I don't remember if it was during COVID or maybe right before COVID, sent me a picture of, I don't remember if it's a PLC 2 or PLC 3 that was actively up and running a facility. And they're very similar. Vlad, I think that we have to be more worried about the kids when Rockwell comes out with Studio 50,000 and then they just discontinue everything before. At that, you're probably just prompting Claude to go ahead and build all of your PLC programs and make all of your changes from there. Rich, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much. We do want to go ask you all of the questions that we get to ask all of our guests. And the first one is a predict the future question. It is one of my favorite questions. And we are asking our guests about systems integrator and integration. And you brought up a really good point of all of these groups are offering services and all of these groups are buying integrators. Do you think the integration community in the next 5 years, are we going to have a lot of small integrators of people who have gone out and are working on very specific problems? Do you think everything's going to get gobbled up into 1,000 or 2,000 plus person firms? What do you think the short-term future looks like for that?
I think part of both. I'll add a caveat to this after I say what I'm going to say, but I think companies are still going to acquire integration firms, but what's happening is when they do that, they're leaving a void, and somebody's got to fill that void, right? It's the same thing that happens, and just happens. It doesn't have to be integration. This is just companies. As a company grows, the landscape of your clients change. And where when you were a 5-person group, you were doing these types of projects.
Yep.
Now that you're a 20-person group, you don't even want, you're not even going to get out of bed for those projects. Again, I'm making it kind of sound bad, but you know, you're looking at these. Well, who's doing these projects? Somebody's got to do that. And that's the opportunity for upstarts, right? It's like, hey, let's go. There's work out there that these other companies are just passing by because it's not, you know, over, you know, $250,000. So they're not going to, they're not going to waste any time on it. So as companies grow, they inherently clients start dropping off, and which makes it available for other people. So I think the opportunity is there. My only concern is, are there going to be enough entrepreneurs that can do this type of work that are going to take that type of work, or are we just going to run out of people that want to do that type of work? So, and the other thing is, you know, if you're, I hate fads, I hate buzzwords. I mean, I think we all do. I mean, it's sifting through it to find out what's the reality with buzzwords and things like that. I'd say with you know AI, you know, things like ChatGPT and Claude Code, you got to leverage that. I mean, I don't think, you know, you got the people that are going to be like, oh, it's going to take over the world and this and that, and well, you don't have any control over that, so just put that aside. You know, how am I going to use it today to solve my problems, to get better, to be faster, to be more competitive? Because if you're not doing it, somebody else is going to do it. And you have to be able to leverage things like that. So I think, you know, the person that can leverage that the best is going to have a better chance of success. The downside is, and this goes back to, again, showing my age of, oh my God, you know, calculators, you know, people aren't going to learn math anymore. And, you know, that whole same thing. And there's a little bit of a fear I have of that, is people are just going to have the easy button, right? We'll just press the easy button and away you go, and nobody's got to think anymore. In my industries, boy, you got to think. I mean, you're solving problems. You're not code writing is a subset of what we do. That's the final outcome. Getting there is the hard part. I mean, if you can spend your time evaluating a problem, you know, architecting a solution, creating your documents, your functional specs, your software design documents, and if you can lay out that all out, sure, feed that into an AI engine and have it write some code for you. But to get to that part, that's where the true talent comes in. You know, I've always said, you know, since the beginning of time, we'll call it, is, you know, father time here, you know, automate the easy things and use your brain for the things that matter, right? So if you got mundane things, I mean, I use it for estimating and proposal writing. I did 8 estimates over you know, a day. It used to take me 3 days to do an estimate. I mean, it's phenomenal. You know, I mean, make sure you're doing it right, because they lie to you. You know, so you gotta, you know, make sure you have the right call them constraints, definitions, guardrails, all that stuff in place to give you the outputs that you want, and always check your work. Yeah, I mean, even I mean, a ton of what I've done in my career is reverse engineering stuff. People have a problem. They have an OEM that went out of business, and they have a PLC that didn't load its comments into the PLC because none of them did back in the day. So all you have is raw ladder logic. And believe me, I used to do that. I used to take raw PLC logic with hopefully a drawing, and reverse engineer it enough to be able to help this client, or rewrite it. And it can be done. It's just nobody wants to do it. So
it's tough work. It is tough work, and everyone wants to know why it's not going faster. And no one can tell you how the machine's supposed to work. In my experience, every time I've done that, no one knows how the machine's supposed to work. And then, like, the stories come out of maybe the machine never worked, and maybe we were never able to put the label on there. Maybe the filler never did work, and the sensor hasn't gone missing. It just was never installed, and now we've got to go add some more lines of code to make it work. No, absolutely, I agree, Rich. There is and will certainly be opportunities, and leveraging the tools for leveraging the tools for that is very important. And that may be your answer to the next question when we talk about career advice. But if someone comes to you, Rich, and say they're early on in their Fishbone journey, what is the best piece of career advice that you give new employees?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the three things I look for, and that's the desire, attitude, and aptitude. It's just having that, the willingness to learn. And it really depends on who you're interviewing with. Everybody's got different requirements, but those are kind of my requirements. It's more about the person than what they necessarily know. Because if you have the ability to learn and the desire to learn, we can teach you anything, right? Sky's the limit. It's just you gotta want to learn, because I learn new stuff every project I go on, right? You just never are gonna know everything that's out there. It's just there's always something to learn, so you have to be willing to do that. The other thing is decide, what type of, if you're going to be an integrator, want to be in the integration world, or in, I don't even really want to call it integration world, but just automation maybe. I don't know what the right term is anymore. But what type of company or what type of work do you want to do? Do you want to be a coder? I think we have to separate coders from controls engineers. They're different things, right? There's a lot of talented coders out there, but in my mind, when I think of coder, it's like somebody's handing you something and say, "Hey, code this." Well, we're the people that say this is what you want to code. Somebody's got to figure that out. That's to me is the harder part, and that's where if you are going to be timid of AI, it's just doing the keystrokes that might be where AI is going to start taking over. So but somebody's got to feed it the information, right? Somebody's got to tell it what to do and figure out what the solution should be. So I would say know the tools, know the general purpose tools like that, right out of the gate, because honestly, that's what I look for. I look for somebody that's more fluent in that than I am. And what do you bring to the table? How can you help us do this better? How do we make this more standardized processes, or to use the AI vernacular? What's a standardized skill that we can create that we're doing this the same every time? Run the same routine every time, so we get repeatable results. So everybody's kind of doing it the same way. There's value there. Back in the old days, it was everybody's kind of just does their own way of programming, and they're proud of it, and they keep it close to the chest, and heaven forbid somebody else has got to go work on that because they have no idea what they did. And nobody wrote comments because I know what I did, so why do I need to put comments in there?
The way you're talking about the old days and people writing comments and things, I'm like, have I cracked my head and woken up 20 years into the future? I feel like more times than not, we see sometimes there are comments, very infrequently are they useful comments. Absolutely. That is fantastic. So advice, Rich.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I say that, and that's how we try to do things. But honestly, especially OEMs, not to throw anybody under the bus by any means, but there's code that was written 20 years ago that OEMs are still using. It's just not modern practices, modern techniques, because their mindset is it works. So
why change a winning formula, right?
Why change it? And I get that. But at some point you have to move into the now, and you have to modernize a little bit. A lot of times it's predicated on when does the hardware become obsolete and I can't get it anymore. Oh, now we got to rewrite our code. So, but
the smallest amount that we need to.
Yeah, exactly. As much as we know we should be doing a better job, a lot of people don't. And not to say our way is the right way, but because there are a lot of right answers. Give 10 engineers the same problem and you get 10 different solutions. It's all a matter of it produces the same widget at the end. Not to say one way is better than the other,
Absolutely. Rich, we want to ask you about a book recommendation. You've mentioned something very interesting that I've looked up on the side while we were going through the podcast that you're currently reading. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a book. I think it just came out last month. Protect It All by Aaron Crow, I believe it is. Um, you know, I was just again cruising along LinkedIn and saw a little post. Somebody had it, holding the book up. I was like, oh, let's take a look at that. And it's if you look at the title, Protect It All, it's the OT and the IT are kind of enunciated, and that's what it's about. It's about IT, OT, it's about cybersecurity. And the thing honestly, I can't put it down. Before I jumped on here, I was out on the outside, kind of on my phone, reading through it. It's one of those that, and everybody's got their own type of books that get them engaged. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to keep you engaged or not. But the thing I liked about it is it was really the level. It wasn't an IT person talking in IT language. It was somebody talking in day-to-day language, very anecdotal. A lot of they referred to Stuxnet. They referred to all these different issues. The municipality breaches that we've had recently, refers to those and kind of brings them down and say this is what happened and here's how it could have been prevented and all this kind of stuff. And not only that, but it's how do you protect your kid's cell phone and your iPads and it's not just industry, it's personal use. How do you your home network, when everybody just gets their router from their internet provider and leaves all the default passwords in and just throws it out there and everything's on the same network, especially with all of us working from home and we have really our business on the same network as our home. So segmenting things like that out, having a router that or VLANing it or something, some kind of a protection to keep that stuff separate. So it really kind of breaks down those fundamentals. So it's a great book. Easy read. I'd encourage anybody to take a look. And
yeah, I would say,
in no way am I sponsored by that person. So just
absolutely. It's what was I gonna say? I see more and more customers on the industrial side, being a lot more cybersecurity conscious. And I have certainly spent a lot of conversations discussing the 62443 standard, right, from ISA, which is the industrial cybersecurity. And I think there's more and more relevance, I would say, now for a variety of reasons. Obviously, there's regulations coming in, there's AI, there's challenges on whether or not it's going to be so good that it's going to write all these impersonating emails and be able to get to the right infrastructure. So I think it's
they're already using
sure.
Yeah, they're already using stuff like that. We're used to get that email that's like, oh, well, this is from the Prince of Zimbabwe or something like that, and it's like you knew it was garbage. Now it's like, well, we're really deep faking voices on phone calls. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can happen. So definitely have a plan. I mean, he talks about in your family you should have a mechanism, right? A callback, a keyword. I mean, it sounds a little bit on the edge of paranoia, but it's not. It's like it's the world we live in today, right? You have to protect yourself. And the thing that was really eye-opening to me, everybody knows about you getting your identity stolen, right? It's like, oh, well, that happens to so and so, or that happened to so and so. I even had an issue years ago that I had to fix. But your kids, they sit and grab your kid's identity and lurk for however long it takes for them to start becoming an adult and start getting accounts and credit, and then they take over and attack that person. I mean, it's brutal.
No, I'm getting paranoid, Rich. To be honest with you, Dave and I have learned over the years, having talked to many kind of only cybersecurity focused professionals, is that it's always doom and gloom, regardless of what date is, what year it is. They're always thinking there's.
That's why this book is great, because it comes from a person that's been there, done that, and they don't make it doom and gloom. They will point it out. They'll say, look, I'm not trying to scare this or scare that, but here are just some simple things that you can do to protect yourself. And it's really focused on, again, not to, get into a buzzword or anything like that, but it's more about the culture than it is about technology. Because technology is only going to take you so far. And how many times have you seen somebody put a piece of technology in place for it to never be configured or to be configured wrong or
Yeah.
to leave the default passwords in, or to whatever, insert, poor protocol here. That it just was,
Yep.
it was the technology, and they put blind faith in it. Like, oh, I got my firewall, I'm good to go. Well, guess what? That's not how they're getting in. They're getting in by finding somebody else's credentials, and then it's a walk in the park. You don't need a firewall, does nothing. They're assuming somebody else's identity, right? So it doesn't matter how good of a firewall you put up.
Absolutely. Rich, the next question is one of my personal favorites. We've only recently added it to our lineup of questions, but basically it's the thought, as a service provider, I'm assuming you've thought about this over the last couple of decades, is you always have this thought, can I build a solution, right? Whether that's a software solution or hardware solution to then sell to some of these customers, right? And of course, I'm always thinking about different ideas. Am I building another SCADA, another MES, or something else? So I guess the way I would formulate this question, imagine for a moment that I come into Fishbone, I'm an entrepreneur in residence, you have all this wealth of knowledge. What are we building?
What is it that you're building
Yes.
specifically, or
Yes.
what type of product?
What would you assign me to build, right? Like, what kind
Yeah,
of thoughts do you think could manufacturers benefit from?
yeah. Well, one school of thought is automating and packaging what you're good at. And let me explain that. So, you have integrators, you can kind of put them in two different groups. There's multiple different units of measure too there, but you have kind of your generalist, and then you have specialists. And both can be successful. And when it comes to productizing something, that's usually where the specialists start doing things. So like, hey, we do, just one I happen to know off the top of my head, we do liquid fertilizer plants, and we're really good at it. And we have the name out there, and we're going to productize our code. So it is really kind of, it's like, exaggerating a little bit, but it's like buying, Windows, or, buying software. It is a packaged product. It's configurable to a degree, so it's not, you're not locked into, exactly everything it gives, but it's a product. The code's already written. You just say, well, how many tanks do I have? How many ingredients do I have? And you kind of configure it, and it's a product. Where your generalists are going to be, and this is kind of more where we fit, is what's your problem? We're going to solve it. So it's hard for us to productize anything, because every day it's something different. We're solving a different problem, and there's a different strategy and a different way you position your company based on which one of those you're going to be. The ones I see struggle the most are the generalist that wants to have a product. So you're not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying your kind of mode of operation is, again, you're kind of doing all this custom stuff, and now you're trying to put a wrapper around something and selling it as a product. And services and products are not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. It's a whole different mindset. So I usually tell people, if you can't define the difference between a project manager, a program manager, and a product manager, figure that out first. Tell me what those are, and then maybe let's talk, because they are completely different people depending upon what you're selling or what you're trying to sell. So, and what your deliverables are. So, as a generalist, it's almost like our products would be internal products. And we do this. We automate and package processes. Like, we'll go back to the olden days. Who goes in and manually types in all their tags? Or who manually types in all their descriptions in AutoCAD? You don't. You build a spreadsheet, you build macro. I mean, again, we're doing the older days. There's better tools nowadays, but you're either putting them in a spreadsheet and you block paste them, or you build some kind of an import utility. Nowadays, a lot of that stuff's already built there for you. Somehow you're building a tool that allows you to do your job better. That's your internal product. And if you're a generalist type of integrator, that's probably time well spent. How do we do our projects quicker, faster, better? And not just that, but more consistent. So we're kind of doing them the same way every time. Every time our alarm logic looks the same. It's not, well, this person was on this project, so their alarm logic looks like this, and this person does it different, and it's not a hodgepodge. Even though we're custom, we kind of standardize on the tools that we use to develop a custom solution. If you're going to build an actual sellable product, I think it's easier if you're a specialist because you are the expert in that area. You are, again, going back to the liquid fertilizer, we know this. So we know all the nuances that need to go into that chunk of code for that package, right? So that tends to be a little more, not to say a generalist can't get there, but you have to have a concerted effort that, hey, we need to learn everything about this market so we can build a product that's going to be sellable, right? So kind of a roundabout way of saying, if it was me personally and it was Fishbone, I would find my internal product that we're going to build. And we've done that since, previous places I've been. Is, again, I go back to automate the things that are simple. Well, what is that? You're building a tool, you're building a product, something that you can feed it information and spits out the answer at the end. Even drawing screen templates and things like that. So
absolutely, Rich, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Last question for you, because you've given so much to all the listeners, is how can our listeners help? Who are you looking to talk to and connect with? Are you guys looking to hire, or are you looking for your new clients? Very much your opportunity to ask our listeners anything.
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking to hire. We're always looking to grow. Always looking for new clients. All of the above, really. I'd say, just to tell you a little bit more about Fishbone, as we are right now, as it stands, we are a nationwide remote company. So we have no brick and mortar. We have people people are all over the country. Not to say this isn't going to change, maybe, but it's more about, is there a right fit? I don't care if you live in Maine or if you live in Nebraska. I mean, sometimes there are advantageous places. It's more about, can I find an airport and get to my customer site? And a lot of our projects are not necessarily in our backyard. We do all of our build-up work in our offices. Do all of our, obviously you do your discovery phase on the client site. So you're going in, you're rooting through panels, and you're taking pictures, and you're interviewing clients and their operators, their maintenance, and you're getting all the baseline information. But when we start transitioning into design and programming and testing, that's all office work. We simulate everything in our code, so we can do extensive testing before we deploy it. And then it's the other phase is your startup and commissioning, is when you go back on site. So it's very much a little bit upfront of travel, a lot of office work, and then then it's go time at the end, and then it's throw people at the site and try to make this thing work, type of a thing. So that's kind of our model. There are pros and cons to that. We can go through the whole conversation of, is remote better than having brick and mortar, or vice versa. There's pros and cons to both. As we grow, we will probably spin up an office. It really depends upon where we get a concentration of people, or if we have a concentration of clients somewhere. It just all depends on what makes the most sense. It's just not practical at this point. So we just we're looking for, again, up the stack, PLC, HMI, SCADA, some MES, but HMI, SCADA, PLC is really the core of what we do. So yeah, as far as us growing, looking for people, clients, our claim to fame is really, with my background and Robert's background, I said this in the introduction, covering the whole problem. Quick story. We had a client, bakery. They had a bakery line, basically a dough line, a bunch of mixers, ingredient delivery, mix the dough, dump the dough, chunk it, form it. The line had been down for a year. It was a secondary line, but it had been down for a year, and they had everybody and their brother in there trying to fix it. Periodically, maintenance tried to fix it. Robert happened to be on site doing a different project and got caught wind of this. And he said, hey, give us a shot. And he calls me and said, hey, can you come out here and let's take a look at this thing. We had it running in 2 days. I mean, and it's only because of the diversity that of skill sets, because the reason why they'd even gotten to that condition is because first mechanical came in and broke it worse than it was. And then electrical came in and broke it worse than it was. And then automation came in and broke it worse than it was. You needed to have the complete understanding of the process to know it. And for the first day, we even stumbled. It's like, oh, wow, this is a head scratcher. And finally, I just said, forget what you know about this system. Go back to everything has to be validated. Everything. I mean, all the way from, you know what it ended up being? Hydraulic hoses in the wrong position.
Oh.
You know, and that perpetuated it. I mean, as an automation person, do you expect that? I mean, that's just, well, mechanical should have forced the valves, right? And say, yep, extend the cylinder, retract the cylinder. And I'm making that's simpler than it really was. I mean, because that perpetuated electrical problems because they tried to fix it electrically when it really was a mechanical problem. So you really had like about three things wrong at the same time. So even us, when we're like, oh, this is wrong, and we fix it, and it still didn't work. We're like, oh, wow, this is a head scratcher. They're like, well, just keep going. So anyway, just a quick story about some of the value. And so when I say for clients, we fit best with companies that don't necessarily have a full-blown engineering staff. I mean, almost all of our work, we don't get a requirements document. We don't get a sequence of operations. We're lucky to even get a P&ID, and even when we do, it's not complete. We end up, that's part of our processes. We finish and validate the P&ID before we even start anything else. So where we help is, we just, what's your problem? And we'll fill in the gaps where we need to fill in the gaps. So.
Yeah, Rich, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. We're absolutely going to have you back at some point in the near future. And thank you to all of our listeners for coming and hanging out with us, especially if you're watching on LinkedIn. Make sure you're connected to Rich and following Fishbone. Make sure you're following Vlad and myself in Manufacturing Hub for our Wednesday episodes. Vlad and I will be back next week to continue talking about building a system integration company, and we're very excited for that. If you guys have made it this far on YouTube or podcast format or any of those other places, thank you so much. Please give us a thumbs up. Please follow along and hit the subscribe button and all those awesome things. When I Ask That and Vlad launches podcasts,